thankful for my kindergarten class who made these wonderful crafts to celebrate Thanksgiving.
After the Native Americans helped the Pilgrims survive their first winter in America, the Puritans invited them to share the first Thanksgiving.
Oh, these are adorably wrong.
A 5-year-old made that.
Based off of the lies that you taught them.
Excuse me?
Oh, it's not your fault. These are full of half-truths and historical propaganda.
I thought the Native Americans and the Pilgrims were like besties or whatever.
At best, the Pilgrims and Wampanoags could be described as political allies. By the time the Pilgrims showed up, not only were 2/3 of the Massachusetts tribes completely wiped out by European slave owners and diseases, the Pilgrims were constantly at war with the indigenous people and routinely tortured them.
But what about Squanto, the Native American who learned English to help out the Pilgrims?
He was actually a slave that was hauled off to Europe, and then he learned English so that he could escape.
But they did celebrate it every year, right?
Not exactly. The next one was 16 years later, and unfortunately, it was because the Puritans were celebrating the massacre of the Pequot tribe. Back then, Thanksgiving was also for families, specifically murdering them.
Okay, we get it. History's awful. The Puritans were terrible. And now we have to let our children know that the holiday started with tons of killings. Happy?
Well, we actually have just about everything wrong with the Thanksgiving myth. Definitely didn't wear these buckle hats. Didn't land on Plymouth Rock. And as for that turkey...
Oh, no, not turkey.
More like venison, fowl, and eel.
Oh! Who cares about how this stupid holiday got started anyway?
Exactly. In George Washington's 1789 Thanksgiving Proclamation, the settlers aren't mentioned not even once. Thanksgiving wasn't celebrated nationwide until 1863 when this guy declared it a national holiday during the Civil War in order to bring the country together. That's why all of our foods are from the 19th century.
So Lincoln came up with the whole Indian pilgrim story.
Nope. That myth didn't catch on until the 1900s after we had fought and killed all the Native Americans. And then we put it into textbooks as fact. Because America. But the food is really good. And if you ignore all the terrible history, like, the murdering, the raping, the pillaging, it's still kind of a great holiday.
So the Mayflower is a lie.
Why do we eat cranberry sauce?
What about stuffing?
Is Black Friday really just a capitalist conspiracy to get poor people to buy things so we can't truly live out a populist revolt?
Or is it?
Really in America? Is this really in America?
And what about corn?
I am never telling you the truth ever again.
Whose land? Ireland. Whose land? Ireland. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now.
Thanksgiving for us is a day of mourning because it represents the day when the Pilgrims first settled here in New England, and they started their reign of tyranny and genocidal acts amongst the indigenous tribes. We shouldn't be teaching children 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Columbus was a murderer and a rapist.
When do we want it?
Since the invasion of Columbus and the rest of the Europeans, Native people have been virtually non-stop victims of terrorism.
It's complicated because I also want to spend time with my family, and we do have the tradition of celebrating Thanksgiving, but there's definitely a big part of me that every time we sit down for Thanksgiving wants to talk about injustice and the fact that we're living on stolen land.
We tried to feed them and take care of them because the Pilgrims wouldn't have made it through the winter without us. And they paid us back by savagely abusing us and murdering us and enslaving us, stealing our crops.
Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us.
It's just like Malcolm X said. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. Plymouth, to me, it's not America's hometown. Plymouth to me is nothing more than continuing the mythology. We don't see any reason to celebrate the arrival of the Pilgrims. What the heck did they do for us? Nothing. My name is Mourning James. I'm a member of the Aquinnah Wampanoag tribe of Gay Head, co-leader of United American Indians of New England, and an organizer of the National Day of Mourning. The truth is that the first Thanksgiving was not in 1621. The first Thanksgiving was in 1637 because Governor Winthrop decided that he would give thanks for the safe return of the people who went to Mystic, Connecticut and participated into the massacre of the Pequot. That was the real first Thanksgiving. And we tend to look at it as like, hey, first Thanksgiving. Here it is, Plymouth Pebble. If anyone thinks that this is where the Pilgrims stepped ashore, like I said, they had unbelievably long legs. My father started National Day of Mourning in 1970 because he had been invited to address a big banquet of dignitaries and all this kind of thing, and they asked for a copy of his speech in advance, which he sent, and then within days they came back and said, you can't give this speech. It's too inflammatory. The Pilgrims and the Indians sat down to a beautiful dinner and lived happily ever after. The end. He was censored, plain and simple. It got out under the Moccasin Telegraph, and a few hundred indigenous native people came to Plymouth and they declared it a National Day of Mourning. And this year marks our 48th year of being on this hill. Really, and that's what this all means, the oppression, and the oppression has not ceased. It hasn't ceased. We continue to experience it every time I read that. And I do have to stop because that's hard. It's hard to read it. That's what Day of Mourning means. We stand here in our circle, we have our prayer, we have whatever, and then we speak.
Every inch of this land is Indian land. We are as strong as ever.
Our rates of suicide, our rates of alcoholism, poverty, all these kinds, nothing's really changed. But every year when we come here, we're trying to at least make people aware of things like that. It's just so ridiculous. We're all human beings. I think the problem is they think that we've disappeared. We have not vanished. We have not been conquered. We are still here. What else can I say?
Proof. I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the whole truth. Not the proof.
So, let's stop the nonsense. Cut the cap. In the game.
Proof. I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the whole truth. Not the proof.
Thanks for tuning in to Why Society, challenging you to think for yourself. TikTok, go on over to YouTube at The Bold Authority is where you'll find me. In the meantime, like, follow, and share.